In this episode, we take a look at some simple steps to protect the privacy of the data for your AI.
Welcome to Click AI Radio, where you'll learn the secrets to transforming your small to medium business. Grant has been helping businesses transform using technology for over 30 years. Advanced technologies like artificial intelligence have been available only to large companies and advanced technical teams. Grant will discuss how you can use to leverage AI and other technologies to grow your small to medium business. As a gift, Grant is offering his ebook, AI for Sales Growth, at clickairadio.com. Now, here's your host and biz tech geek, Grant Larson.
Hey, welcome everybody to another episode of Click AI Radio. Well, certainly data privacy has been on the minds of a lot of people and organizations and governments and institutions and so forth. No surprise there. One of the things, though, about AI is that, in general, it's not spent as much time, if you will, putting a focus on that area. And it's been a bit of a problem and will become more of a problem if we don't do something about it as we work with our application and use of AI itself. Now, I was looking at several different groups and what they talked about and what they felt about it. At the end of this episode, I'm going to throw out 2 steps that I have seen that help us mitigate the challenges around this, right? That help to prevent some of the challenges of slippage, if you will, of getting the privacy of people's information out there that shouldn't be. Now, to frame that up, I want to introduce a framework for it. One of the blogs I looked at, it was called "Beware the Privacy Violations in Artificial Intelligence Applications." It comes from ISA. Let's see if I can say that. ISACA.org. There you go. A blog from there. Anyway, here I'm going to read an interesting quote here, right? It said, look, artificial intelligence has been no different when seen through a privacy by design lens, as privacy has not been top of mind in the development of AI technologies. Yeah, all right. So end quote there. I agree with that. That has been true. In fact, a lot of our efforts have been, can we just prove the viability of this technology in terms of helping people, individuals, businesses? Certainly, there's been success with AI, and there's been some challenges. Now, what's introduced here is 3 interesting pieces to consider when we're looking at privacy. One of those has to do with what's called data persistence. All right, so put your nerd hat on. Going to be nerdy here for a moment. Data persistence. That means the data existing today will last longer than the human subjects that created it. All right. And that's, of course, driven by things like low data storage costs, all the technologies that are available to allow our data to live a lot longer than us as people. So that creates a potential privacy challenge. There's another data privacy challenge. It's called data repurposing. And that is data that was originally created then gets used in ways that is beyond what it was originally intended. And AI is data hungry, will use that up, suck that up. All right, and the third sort of area around privacy includes what's called a data spillover. And here's where, and this happens a bit, and it actually drove a lot of the GDPR stuff, right? Which is data collected on people who were not the target of data collection. And so, of course, driving out of it was things like, GDPR out of Europe, certainly CCPA out of California. All of those things drive to or point to the need for having some regulation around it. Now, it's one thing to have regulation. It's entirely different to enforce it. And some of that comes upon us as business owners. It means that there are a few things that we can and must do in order to protect the privacy of people's data and their information while still delivering value from AI. And that's certainly the balance that we're going for. One of the primary concerns, of course, with AI is its ability to replicate or reinforce or even amplify harmful biases, right? And this is a challenge because those biases can proliferate and then end up driving insights and recommendations and predictions that, of course, are wrong, right? Have this human bias in it. There's another challenge too that we have with AI. Let's say that we're going to try to fix that or solve for that. One of the problems, though, is that a lot of our auditing methods used today are based on the fact that something has already occurred. Meaning, in this case with AI, that makes it even more difficult, right? Because it means that I've created an AI model and I'm starting to then employ recommendations, insights, and decisions, ways in which I work with people or deliver solutions, all with the incorporated bad behavior already. So it's kind of late. Now, it doesn't mean that we shouldn't do the audits on the data, but they're post-deployment by nature, meaning I've already deployed it. So what we have to figure out is to find a balance, right, with privacy as well as AI progress. It's finding the ability to say, I'm gonna grow my data usage in a way that protects the privacy of the individuals involved. But I also need to allow AI to move forward. And that right there is, of course, the challenge that we're looking to pursue. Some groups use consent today, right? It's, hey, get someone to consent that you can be happy to share your information with them. That has some challenges with that, though. Consent's not always as powerful as a tool as we might believe. And there's been examples where consent has been still misappropriated, right? What people thought originally was consent for a certain use, then there was spillover into other areas, meaning people didn't know their data was being used by AI for other purposes. So again, even though consent might be there and organizations or people are well-intending, controlling the boundaries of the consent and enforcing that still is a real challenge and relies on a lot of people to manually handle that, which means that there's more opportunities for us to mess up. I was looking at a report from the Brookings Institute. They were talking about AI governance initiative. And what was interesting there is this is some legislation that was pursuing this balance of how to pass privacy legislation while still allowing for AI to do the kind of work that it needs to and bring about some of the benefits to humanity that we feel that we can do with this awesome technology. One of the techniques that is mentioned here in this Brookings Institute report was, and you've heard it before, is all around what's called algorithm clarity, right? It's having clarity on how the algorithm's using your information. Right, that seems to be a useful piece to help dealing with it. But one of the problems with that is, as an SMB owner, is that it ends up giving, though, the burden typically on the backs of the SMB owner to say two things. One, I have to make things transparent so that my customers are aware that some aspects of their business information is leveraged by AI, right? And so that's sort of the first incumbency, is to say, hey, I'm going to tell you, here's what we're going to do with your data. It's going to be used in AI, and to draw the line on what information is not used. Okay, so that's what kind of comes out of this, right? It's an activity or being forthright with our customers on what the intended use of the information that will or will not be used, right? And to draw that line. That's the first sort of consideration in algorithmic clarity. The second consideration, though, is explainability, right? So that's, again, where you let your customers know what kind of algorithms are being used, right? And this may include, access to a human to provide that clarity. Okay. The thing I struggle with this, and of course I that's all well and good. The thing I sometimes get challenged with here is, what the heck does it mean to have one of the people in your team explain, oh yeah, we use linear regression, or we use a particular classification model, or a Bayes model, right, etc. We used all these different machine learning models and algorithms to. That's, what good is that, right? 99% of the people are going to be like, what are you talking about? How did that help me understand any better? So this area of explainability, right? So the transparency, hey, we're going to use this kind of information or not this kind of information in terms of the AI. So being clear with your customers on that. And then number two, coming up with a well set description for the kinds of algorithms being used. Here's maybe a simple way to think about it. You can break it into two buckets, right? When you're trying to explain AI to your customers, say, hey, we're going to be using this set of data for our AI algorithms, but we want to let you know that there's sort of two major areas, right? And what I'm going to say here doesn't apply to all of AI, but for sort of, AI for analytics, then this applies. And it could be simply this. For those kinds of AI problems where we're trying to determine yes or no answers, then we use what's called classification models, right? So will it be good for us to sell you this product or that product? Yes or no? All right. Classification kinds of problems. Then there's the other kind of problem, which is we'll use some AI algorithms to help us know what might be the right price range, right? Now, of course, those are called more regression style algorithms, but you don't need to say that. It's simply, we're going to use AI to help us understand yes or no kinds of answers or questions to, answers to questions. And the others, we're going to use it to understand, proper pricing perhaps, right? Things that are not necessarily yes or no, but degrees of difference, right? Those are two major buckets, and we can work on developing pretty simple language to explain this stuff. Otherwise, what good is it, right? If people can't get it. All right, I want to just point out one other thing here. So let me just summarize. So there's two things I think that an SMB can do to apply AI. All right. So and to help solve for this problem of data privacy. After looking at and applying AI in multiple situations over over many years, I've come down to these two steps. They're a bit overly simplified, but I still think that if you print these out, put it on your wall, it could save you some real pain. All right, so here's the first one. The first one is where I've seen a fair amount of pain, and this will sound really overly simple. First one is this. Start your AI journey with vetted questions and data oversight. Like what? All right, I'll come back to that. And number two, apply AI using smart steps. What? All right, I'll come back to that also. All right, so let me talk about number one here for a moment. So on number one here, starting your AI journey with vetted questions and data oversight. It seems like an obvious first step, but when you examine the case studies of AI failures, empirically, it looks like, this step has either been skipped or was not given the proper weighting. Look, a key technique here is to first vet, while you're doing this, is to first vet by leveraging an independent party or going under NDA with someone. But what you want to challenge is the intended question you're trying to address with AI. Right? Some of the biggest missteps with AI has been, it was the wrong question to be asking. It was the wrong use case to be pursuing, right? There was inherently something that was either, prone to lots of bias or was an unethical use of AI, right? So in this step, the anticipated questions for AI, I know this sounds so simple, but it should be written down and evaluated in the context of the impact to your customers and to other interested parties and to humanity, for crying out loud, right? Just stop and do that simple step. I know it sounds so doggone obvious, but all right, now, what does it mean to vet your AI questions? Well, evaluate the AI implications to your customers, as well as look at some of those three elements that I introduced earlier. In other words, hey, will there be data persistence? What does it mean for the data that I'll be collecting to be in existence longer than the humans that created it, right? What does that do in terms of privacy impacts or data repurposing? Wait a minute, are we going to be using the data beyond its originally, imagined purpose? And if so, what obligation do we have to the people involved? And number three, data spillovers, right? Ask the question, wait, are we collecting data on people we're not targeted of those with whom we initially intended. So stop and ask, do I have the right question? And then also, what's the impact of these to these 3 AI privacy areas of data persistence, repurposing, and data spillovers? All right, that's step 1. Stop and do a little vetted questioning, right? And data oversight before you get too far. All right, number 2 is this. This one I call applying AI using smart steps. What this means is to iterate on the AI model and continue to refine and refactor and rebuild it as more is learned. What that does is it allows us to even adjust our AI models that might have some bias that we discover, right? So what it means is to build your vetted model, learn from experience, and then evaluate the impact to your business, to your customers, and then iterate, right? So there's a book that came out not too long ago. It's by Bernard Marr. It's called Artificial Intelligence in Practice. And what he's got in there is he's got 50 company use cases where AI was applied. Now, I just want to pull something from that book that's interesting. He goes, in that book, there's this one use case about Alibaba in China, right, who ultimately built a virtual platform that mimicked customer behaviors. And one of the reasons they did it was because it would take too long and too much effort to continually refactor their system. And so this virtual platform was used to allow the AI to continue to be refined and rebuilt and refactored. Now, to do lots of model rebuilding in some situations, right? That's really heavy effort to do. So you're either going to have to put in the extra effort up front to really ensure that you got the data privacy problem solved for, or do that. And if you're able to, then do these smart steps, which I found is really helpful, which is take the model, build it, try to apply it, look for where bias might be exposed or privacy might be exposed when you didn't expect it. The lesson is this. Adjust your mindset as a business owner to refine your AI model over time, right? Take into consideration the changes in context, the changes in the economy, as well as lessons learned, and put in your mind that part of doing AI means that we'll continue to refine and improve and rebuild this AI model. Now, when you combine these 2 steps, right? This first step is the vetted, privacy-aware questioning, right? And looking at your data, as well as the mindset of smart steps where you simply refactor and improve your AI model over time. What I found is that if you do those 2 things, you're in a much better position for better privacy, AI, data privacy considerations. It puts you on a great path for both near-term as well as long-term viable business impact, to your organization. All right, everybody, thanks for joining. And until next time, use the 2 steps to ensure privacy for your AI that brings incremental business growth.
Thank you for joining Grant on Click AI Radio. Don't forget to subscribe and leave feedback. And remember to download your free ebook. Visit clickairadio.com now.